Thank you so much. And it is so fun to see so many faces I have been crossed paths with over the years. So I'm happy to talk with you about beavers and why they matter and what they mean for us in California in particular. I just want to proceed what I say with acknowledging that I am not a water scientist or a hydrologist or have a background like any of you. I'm a child psychologist and I became an accidental beaver advocate when some decided to move into my town in 2007. And I beginning felt completely ill-equipped for this job. But it turns out psychology is not an unrelated skill to managing beavers, so I was okay. Um, and so we have to remember what we thought, that there used to be beavers all over the United States and North America. Samuel de Champlain said there was a beaver in every river, brook, and rill. There were 1 to 3 beavers per kilometer of stream. There were estimated between 60 and 400 million beavers in North America. We have to imagine how different the United States looked in that watery, mucky world that the beavers left us with. And the 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 prevalence of beavers really was important for a lot of global reasons. So beavers as a population were trapped out of Europe by the 1400s, 1500s, and that drove exploration all around, trapping out all the beavers in England, in Germany, Poland, doing some exploration coming to the New World. And what we know is that actually some of our pilgrims paid for their passage to the New World by with beaver pelts. So beavers were basically like little $20 bills swimming around, and you just kill them, and then you get the money. There's a little coin up in the court. It's the dollar bill designed by Benjamin Franklin. Shows a beaver eating at the Tree of Tyranny. This big map in the background was designed by Henry Mill in the in the 1400s, showing that beavers were all over North America, really settling up into Niagara Falls. So the beaver was a great drive for much of exploration and much of the settling of North America and Europe. Oh, well, Europe before that. Sorry. Um, what we know is that beavers' felt skin were very important.
Yesterday, I came across an article in the 1938 Martinez News Gazette about how important beavers are for flood control and how 500 beavers can do more for flood control than 500 WPA workers. And the quote says, "It's now time that civilization should let beavers and go to beavers and learn of him, and then let the engineers off so that the nature will have a greater amount of flood control." And it's kind of stunning to me that this was in the Martinez News Gazette in 1938, but it's probably fitting. This actually was a reprint of an editorial that also appeared in the Alameda Times, and it was actually written in Oklahoma. So we used to be a lot smarter about beavers than we are now. It was a period of California's history that we did not think that beavers were native. We thought the beavers were an invasive species. And Grinnell, when he wrote his books about beavers in all fur-bearing mammals in 1934, he said that beavers weren't above 1,000 feet in the Sierras, and they didn't exist in our coastal rivers, so they weren't around Martinez or any of these areas. And that didn't make sense to us, so we did some research and worked with a Bureau of Land Management archaeologist who had come across a paleo beaver dam in the 1990s, and it was in the Eastern Sierras. And the oldest part of that dam tested as continuously rebuilt since 1580 AD, all the way up until about 1850 when beavers were wiped out. So that allowed us to publish 3 papers, really re-examine the data, and really look at this in a different way, looking at lots of native lore, lots of trapping records, and really show that beavers were native all across California, which of course they would be. Why would they not be in one state? They'd be everywhere else. Those papers are published in the Fish and Game Journal, which you can check out which is a more organized presentation that I'm allowed to give you right now. And I just want to remind you what a surprise it was for the city of Martinez when beavers showed up in our urban stream. This was 2007, so a major flood control project had just been done in the creek. Nobody really knew that beavers were going to appear on our horizon, but they showed up in a very public way in Alhambra Creek. In those days, you could go to Starbucks, you could stroll out onto the patio, and you could watch them play, and you could even hear them. And it was this sound more than anything else that got me involved, because I thought, wow, do the people that want these beavers dead really even know what that sound is? Beavers make kind of a low whining when they're young, and it sounds like a child crying. The city was concerned about the location of that dam. They were afraid that it was going to cause flooding in an area that was already prone to flooding. So they got a permit pretty quickly to depredate or kill these beavers. But these were very easy to see beavers, so people got very engaged. And there was all the children on the way to school, all the lawyers on the way to the courtroom, all the businessmen looking for a place to park. They could all see these beavers, and people weren't happy about the idea that they were going to be killed. At that time, there was a decision to have a big meeting to discuss the fate of these beavers. And so many people were expected because there was a lot of media attention at the time. We were even on national news. They came from uptown, downtown, and out of town to see these beavers. And the meeting had to be held at the Performing Arts in the high school. And 200 people showed up for that meeting. They said pretty much with one voice, we do not want you to kill these beavers. Find a different way. And that's what Martinez did. It found a different way. We appointed a subcommittee to study the issue, and we ended up hiring Skip Lyle, who came all the way out from Vermont. Remember, this is 2007. There aren't experts trained in this work in California. There aren't any flow devices installed in California. This had never been done before. But we were willing to be a trial case. And what we found was that installing this flow device, which is technically not a beaver deceiver, it is technically a pond leveler, and it moves the water from upstream to downstream in the creek in such a way that the beavers don't have access to it. Because if they did have access to it, they'd plug that pipe. Well, after this was done and it appeared to be working, the city never actually agreed to vote to keep the beavers. And we were worried that the beavers would be safer if we kept them, threw a party for them. And so we held the first Beaver Festival in 2008, and I started the organization Worth a Dam to educate and engage other cities about how to cooperate with beavers. This was a great opportunity. We involved all the other wildlife groups in the area to kind of educate them about how beavers were likely to affect them. And this really became a nice way to enjoy learning about nature and learning about the community. So our Beaver Festival is at the very last Saturday in June, and you guys are all invited, and I would love you all to be part of it. And I want to just convey to you that Martinez isn't the only beaver gig in town anymore. We have, the picture that you can't see right now is a beaver lodge in Laurel Creek in Fairfield. There's some footage that you can't see that is a beaver swimming in a dam in a pond in Pleasant Hill, right behind Target. And this that I can't show you, which I was really excited about, is a family of 7 beavers living behind by Monument Boulevard in Walnut Creek, the actual Walnut Creek of Concord. We got beavers in Nampa, we got beavers in Sonoma. During the time the Martinez beavers were there and mating, we had 27 kits born in Alhambra Creek. And that means we changed the population of beavers all over. But these beavers, I don't think are related to our beavers because they're so dark. They're really dark colors. Ours were much lighter. So, as it happens, when most people have beavers moved into their city, they don't do what Martinez did. They get a permit to depredate or kill them. And these depredation permits are not public. They're not made available to the public, and nobody counts the number of beavers in California that are killed. We actually don't have a fur trade anymore. You can't fur trap a beaver, but you can still get rid of it if it's doing something you don't want on your property. And so for the last 10 years, Wortha Dam has reviewed these depredation permits with a public records request for all over California. And it turns out that counties are really different in how they handle beavers and also how the beaver population has returned all over California. So the number one reason that cities seek a depredation permit or landowners seek a depredation permit is damage to landscaping. And this is a very easy problem to solve with a very small amount of information. The harder problems like the culverts or the flow device like we installed in Martinez, those can also be solved. And we are happy to think that Martinez was a test case for this in California. You know, trapping is easy, but does it work? It turns out that trapping is kind of installing a vacancy sign for new beavers. If it's adequate habitat, now that our population is recovering from the fur trade, that adequate habitat will get reclaimed by a new exploring beaver. And we also found out that you can protect your trees that you want to wrap with wire. You can also use abrasive paint. So you're mixing mason sand with the paint, and the beavers don't like the gritty texture and they won't chew. There is a very good resource that was just published on our website that was published by Project Beaver in Oregon about protecting landscaping, and I would definitely encourage you all to check that out. So does all this crazy beaver saving stuff work? Well, of course it does. What we found out at Martinez is that our flow device controlled the height of the dam for a decade, and the beavers stuck around, and they really changed our habitat in lots of ways. We had very different wildlife. We had new birds and new fish. We never had green heron in the area of the beaver dam before, and then they were all the time in residence and breeding. And we never had hooded merganser in the area before. And we saw more visits from river otters, more visits from kingfishers, and in fact, we saw mink, which we hadn't seen in that area for 35 years. So the beaver is making this area, trapping mud and silt in their dam. That gets broken down by tiny bugs, macroinvertebrates that we can't see, and those get eaten by bigger bugs, of course, than we can see, and those get eaten by birds and fish. So we see this kind of cascading life going on at a beaver pond. In fact, there was just a study in Poland a couple of years ago that said at a beaver pond, the dynamic changes so much that it affects the count of birds 50 miles away, which is a real important thing for us to be thinking about as we face another biodiversity crisis. So I've been working with some of the people who are advocating for beavers in Napa and in Sonoma. We have some great observations of how the habitats have changed, even with the effect of urban beavers. Lots of pictures of wildlife. We found all the wildlife that we photographed in Alhambra Creek was quite amazing. And what I really want to suggest to you is that the beaver isn't just an animal, it's an ecosystem, and it makes such a dynamic difference. There has been tremendous research out of NOAA fisheries for the last 40 years, basically saying that beavers are really essential for juvenile salmonids. They provide a safe place for these baby salmon to grow up and really make a difference in terms of the number one thing that decides how you do when you go to sea is how big you are, how many things fit in your mouth, and how few mouths you fit into. And that really makes a huge difference. We also know that beaver dams are removing nitrogen, they're removing erosion, they're reducing erosion, they're reducing flooding, and they even have been researched to be resistant to fires. What we have is new research out of Dr. Emily Fairfax's work that beaver dams are 3 times more resistant to fire activity than equivalent streams without beavers. We actually have firefighters that use the refuge of a beaver dam to kind of hang out while they're working because it is an area that is more resistant. And remember, if you're lighting a fire, you don't go get wet leaves. And these plants and things that are growing around beaver ponds, they can reach the soil that is saturated and they are more resistant to fire. I really wanted to show you the lovely video that was taken, a drone video that's taken in Tahoe after one of the fires in the last couple of years that showed this area spanning of dead trees. And in the middle of the dead trees, there is a beautiful lush green habitat that did not burn. There's also some great photographs like that from fires in Idaho. What we know is that beavers can really make a difference for fire resistance. Now, during the 2 years of COVID that we weren't able to have a beaver festival, we decided, well, maybe California isn't ready to have a beaver meeting in person, but we could do a virtual beaver meeting. So we did a virtual beaver summit, worked with Sonoma State, and we're able to involve 2 days of some of the best scientists in this area. And we had over 1,000 people enrolled, and 300 of them were state employees. This really kick-started the changes in California for how beavers were being thought about by CDFW. And that information of that California Beaver Summit is available on our website. I would definitely check it out. It's a very nice, and I did, sort of highlight reels as well, just if you just want the good stuff. There's 2 5-minute summaries. I would check them out. Now, what we know is that allowing beavers to exist in our spaces can make things better for a lot of species, and also make things better for a lot of our human problems. The beavers are considered a very good resource in managing some of the dramatic effects of climate change. And as we transition from seeing beavers as a problem to seeing them as a solution, I think our future can look a lot different. Beavers are rodents, but they are rodent with a difference. Their teeth grow all their life, but they can only breed once a year. The children stay with their parents for 2 or 3 years to find out everything they need to know to be a beaver. They go off to seek their fortune. At 2 or 3, our beavers dispersed around February, their second year. And we really have an opportunity to be thinking about this differently. I will say that I definitely think the California Beaver Summit made a huge difference in CDFW thinking differently about trying to coexist with beaver. Once they got it out of their head that they were an invasive species, they and got it into their head that they might actually be useful. California added beaver restoration to its budget, and there has been a slow, I will say it's not speeding, but a slow addition to beaver restoration. So beavers were released in the Maidu territory 2 years ago, and they were released in Tule territory in Fresno this year. And what we know is that there is a big fund for also beaver education to happen on a statewide level. There are so many ways that California could be benefiting from this species if we could just bottle some of the education that we saw happen in Martinez. The final thing that I'm going to leave you with is that Google Earth has actually, Google has actually decided to work with Dr. Fairfax and developed a tool to train AI to see beavers from their satellites, and actually to trace habitat so that the population can be estimated. Nobody's been counting the beaver population in any state for hundreds of years, and this will make a big difference when we begin to think about where they belong and where they haven't yet returned. So all the states want to use the Google tool, but of course California gets to be first, and that's supposed to happen this year, but I haven't heard things yet. The children in Martinez talking about why beavers matter, and some of the education they have gotten from our festivals.
How do beavers help?
They build their dams and help reduce flooding.
They build dams and that helps reduce fires.
They help by providing lots of homes for animals.
Well, they build dams by cutting down trees, and I think that helps preserve the water.
They help make wetlands.
They save salmon.
Martinez was actually in Ranger Rick magazine, and this photograph, which I'm not showing right now, was from Ranger Rick as well. So I really think that we have an opportunity to think of beavers as worth a damn all over California. And I think when beavers come to your city or your town, there are strides we can take to make them worth a damn too.
I am wondering, other than the Beaver Festival, which is always super fun and amazing, are there other ways that people can get involved in any of your efforts with Worth a Damn?
Absolutely. We are looking to increase our ranks always, and all of us at the Beaver Festival are getting older and older, so we would love to build forward. But we also are looking for people to do beaver presentations around the area, and people that are cooperating with beavers are always looking to have resources that teach them about protecting trees and those sorts of things. And there is a $2 million grant was given by CDFW this year for beaver education, and that grant went to Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. We haven't yet heard what brilliant things are coming from there, but as soon as we do, they will be looking for helpers as well.
Great, that sounds wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions or comments for Heidi?
Yeah, this is Todd. I have one. I was curious about the widespread distribution that you mentioned, and especially places like the Central Valley, where I don't think of many woody stemmed plants. And in my experience, beaver mainly like young aspen and things like that. And I was curious where the dominant vegetation is reeds. Do you know what they ate when they and what they built their lodges out of? They usually reinforced the mud with sticks. How they did that in places without a lot of young trees?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is actually one I can tell you the answer to firsthand, because our beavers used tules. They used, we saw lots of varietal feeding. Beavers eat different stuff at different times of year. And in fact, we had one beaver that for some reason only wanted to build dams out of reeds. He would kind of make these little beautiful basket dams. And the beavers that are existing in the Delta live a lot off a lot of tules and reeds. We haven't seen a beaver eat a rundo, but we see that they can eat a lot of lilies and varietal plants that grow around. And the terms of their building of dams, all kinds of things can become material for dams. In Napa, we see beaver dams built with stone. In Martinez, we didn't have any stone, but we've seen beavers use dams with trash. Beavers are very creative and very into recycling.
Thanks.
Heather, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you so much for your work and for the presentation, Heidi. So I know from having seen, community source spottings of different wildlife that sometimes people, it can be hard to tell when in the animal swimming, is it a beaver? Is it an otter? Is it a muskrat? Is it, what is it? And so I was just wondering if you had any handy visual guides. And Maureen, I know the Fish and Wildlife Committee was doing a guide of some kind. I don't know if that ever got published, but this would be a great thing to share with our, members across, different groups across the county, because we do have multiple mammals coming back to our creeks, which is amazing news. We also have an invasive species, the nutria, that is threatening our creeks. And so it'd just be cool to
Have you had sightings of nutria?
There have
in
been.
Pleasant Hill?
I have read. No, I have not heard about them in Pleasant Hill, but I did see an article in a local newspaper that said nutria had been observed somewhere in Contra Costa, that they were infiltrating, but I don't remember the location.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Um, what I will say is that I'm particularly very interested in this, and there is a whole section on our website with video about how to tell the difference between the items of the beaver and the otter and the beaver and the muskrat, and that this is and beaver and nutria. This is um, a, a passion job of mine, so I'm really interested in the thing you created, because I'd love to see it.
yeah, I don't know if Maureen, are you still with us? I don't know if Maureen's still with
Yeah, I'm
us.
here. I'm here.
Do you know, I mean, this was years ago, but I know there was a discussion about putting together like a brochure or a visual guide. Do you know if that ever happened?
Uh, Not like what I don't think it's what you're talking about. They had the wildlife in your backyard brochure, which I think you know about, and they've been currently working on an invasive species in your backyard type of brochure. But I don't think anything like what you're talking about.
Okay, I so then maybe it's just my memory's faulty, but maybe I'm just saying I know somebody, maybe it was CFW, was putting together like just a one pager that showed like this is how to tell the difference between all these different critters. So if anybody comes across that, let's share it. And um meanwhile, Heidi, I'll try to find that article about nutria
Yeah,
being,
I would love to see it. And I
yeah.
will just tell you all that the best clue for looking at a beaver versus a nutria, or a picture of what's called a beaver and versus a nutria, is white whiskers. If you see those big old white whiskers, that's a nutria. And the reason they're not showing you the back of the picture is because it's not a beaver.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so hopefully the nutria get dealt with. But yeah.
Yeah, and nutria, unlike beavers, nutrias can have families 3 times a year, every 3 months. So it's a very different species.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Heidi? Well, thank you so much, Heidi. Really appreciate your knowledge on this.